Have you ever wondered how a tiny, persecuted group from a forgotten corner of the Roman Empire could grow into a global faith? It wasn't through conquest, it wasn't through politics, it all comes down to communication. And the story starts right here, in the book of Acts. We're going to look at the actual speeches that lit the fuse on a world-changing movement. I mean, think about it. It's a huge historical puzzle. How does a group whose leader was just publicly executed by the state not only survive but start to spread like wildfire? They didn't have an army. They didn't have political power. So what did they have? It began with words. Just words. The book of Acts is literally filled with sermons, courtroom defenses, and public arguments. And these weren't just random talks. They were the engine of the whole movement, carrying a message that was incredibly consistent and, as it turns out, unbelievably persuasive. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at how this message even survived against all odds. Then, we'll get into the weeds of what they were actually saying, that core proclamation. After that, we'll see how it broke out of its original box to include literally everyone. We'll see how they handled the crisis that caused. And finally, we'll follow that mission right to the heart of the Roman Empire.
So, let's set the scene. We're in Jerusalem, around 33 AD. Jesus of Nazareth has just been crucified. By all logic, his movement should have been dead on arrival.
But what happened was the exact opposite. Instead of running and hiding, his followers stood up in the most public places you can imagine, in squares, in synagogues, and they just started talking. In the very same city where their leader was killed, they launched a public speaking tour. And the craziest part? People actually stopped and listened. So what in the world were they saying that was so compelling? Well, it turns out it wasn't a bunch of different ideas. It was an incredibly consistent pitch. It didn't matter who was speaking or where they were, the core message was always the same. You could be listening to Peter in Jerusalem, or Stephen right before he's executed, or the Apostle Paul in a synagogue in what we'd call Turkey today, and you'd hear them all building their case from the same blueprint. This wasn't improvisation, you know? This was a coordinated, cohesive story. Just get a load of the audacity here. This is Peter just weeks after the crucifixion, talking to a crowd in Jerusalem. He points his finger and says, "You crucified this guy." But then he completely flips the script. He says, "This man you executed is actually the long-awaited Messiah, and God has proven it by raising him up." Okay, now jump forward in time. This is Paul. He's in a different city, talking to a similar crowd. He builds a similar case from their shared history. And then he lands on the exact same point. Through this, Jesus, you can have forgiveness of sins. It's like they were working from the same playbook. Different speakers, different cities, years apart, but the exact same punchline. And when you put these speeches side by side, it's just fascinating. A clear formula just pops right out. Look at this. They both start by grounding the message in something the audience already knows, prophecy or history. Then they both make a direct charge, saying, "You were involved in his death." But, and this is the key, they both immediately follow up with the vindication. But God overturned your verdict and raised him from the dead. And the final takeaway, the call to action, it's the same for both. Forgiveness of sins is available. It's a powerful and repeatable way to argue a point. Now, the one idea that held this whole argument together was the claim that Jesus was the Messiah, the prophesied anointed one. But here's where they introduced a radical twist. For them, it wasn't that the Messiah wasn't supposed to suffer. They argued the Messiah had to suffer and die to fulfill the scriptures. His execution wasn't a failure that ended the story. They claimed it was the necessary, planned-out climax of the entire story. So this message was powerful, but for a while, it was being delivered almost entirely to a Jewish audience. What happened next was a radical turning point. It was a single realization that would completely change the direction of the movement.
This right here. This is the moment everything changed. Peter is in the house of a Roman soldier, a place he was culturally forbidden to even enter, and he has this epiphany. He realizes this message, this acceptance from God, isn't just for one group of people. This was a seismic shift, a bomb going off in their worldview.
And you can't overstate how revolutionary this was. It meant that non-Jews, or Gentiles as they were called, could be included. But here's the kicker. They could join without first having to convert to Judaism, with all of its laws and customs. This single idea unlocked the door for the message to go truly global. And boom, here we see that new understanding being put into practice.
Paul and Barnabas are in a synagogue, they face rejection, and they make a clean break. They say, okay, if you don't want it, fine. We're turning and taking this message directly to the non-Jews. It's a clear, decisive pivot.
But as you can probably guess, this expansion created a huge internal crisis. If Gentiles are now in, what are the rules for them? This all came to a head in a high-stakes meeting in Jerusalem that would literally decide the future of the entire movement.
This was the debate that could have ripped the whole thing apart. One side was insisting that for a Gentile to really be in, they had to go all in, follow all the laws of Moses, get circumcised, the whole shebang. But another side argued that this was putting up a wall where there shouldn't be one.
Peter stands up and just lays it on the line. He calls these extensive legal requirements a yoke, an unbearable burden. He basically asks, why in the world would we put this on them when God has already shown us he accepts them just as they are? It's a powerful, powerful argument.
So what was the final decision? Well, the verdict, which came from James, a leader in the Jerusalem community, was basically a brilliant compromise. They decided Gentiles would not have to follow the entire Jewish law. Instead, they were just asked to follow 4 essential rules, which were mostly designed to help Jewish and Gentile followers live and eat together in peace.
The official letter they sent out had this key phrase: they decided to impose no further burden. And that right there was the game changer. It streamlined the message, it tore down huge cultural barriers, and it made the whole thing way more accessible to a global audience. So, with that big internal debate settled and the message simplified, the mission to the wider world just exploded. It was now laser-focused on one simple core belief. I mean, you can't get a more distilled version of the message than this. You have a non-Jewish jailer in Philippi who asks the biggest question there is, what do I have to do? And Paul's answer isn't a long list of rules or rituals. It's one simple command: believe in the Lord Jesus. That's it.
And this brings us to the very end of the book of Acts. Paul is under house arrest in Rome, the capital of the empire. After one last time explaining his message to the local Jewish leaders, he makes this final, definitive declaration: this message has now been sent to all nations. And his last word on the matter is just pure confidence. They will listen. So we end up right back where we started, with a question about communication. The story of Acts is really a masterclass in how a message can be reshaped through key speeches, through tough decisions, to go from a kind of local dialect into a universal language. And it really makes you ask, for any idea in any time, what does it actually take to break out of its cultural bubble and truly go global?